In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Ghamidi Sahab has raised a three-pronged critique of the traditional scholarly interpretation of two distinct verses from Surah Al-Nisa, which are often cited to determine the shares of full and maternal siblings in inheritance. In the previous video, we examined the first aspect of his critique. To summarize, verse 12 of Surah Al-Nisa refers to siblings without any explicit qualification. Therefore, inserting the word maternal into this verse is unwarranted and, according to Ghamidi Sahab, raises serious and sensitive questions about the sanctity of the Quran. Let us now turn to the second aspect of Ghamidi Sahab's critique. The word kalala appears in both verse 12 and verse 176 of Surah Al-Nisa. Linguists attribute two distinct meanings to this word. The first meaning refers to a deceased individual who leaves behind neither children nor parents. The second meaning refers to the deceased's relatives, excluding both children and parents. Thus, the first meaning pertains to the deceased themselves, one who dies without surviving parents or children. The second meaning, on the other hand, identifies the relatives of the deceased, provided they are not parents or children. According to the traditional scholars, both verses of Surah Al-Nisa adopt the first meaning of kalala, referring to a deceased person who has left behind no children or parents. Therefore, in their view, these verses specify the shares of the full and maternal siblings of such a deceased person. While Ghamidi Sahab acknowledges that kalala in Arabic can refer to such a person, he argues that another, more prevalent meaning exists, the one which denotes relatives other than parents and children. He believes that the Quran employs kalala in this latter sense. Thus, whereas the scholars believe the verses speak of a deceased person who has no surviving parents or children but has full or maternal siblings, Ghamidi Sahab holds that if we adopt the second meaning of kalala, the verses no longer concern the deceased siblings but rather the relatives and their siblings who are neither children nor parents of the deceased. Ghamidi Sahab argues that Surah Al-Nisa itself provides internal evidence decisive in establishing this latter meaning of kalala. Let us keep in mind that this debate concerns two meanings of kalala, and Ghamidi Sahab explicitly favors one over the other. We now examine the grounds for his preference. According to him, the key lies in the verb used in these verses. Yusa is bequeathed. Its usage is pivotal. He points out that the Quran adopts a distinctive literary style when using the word kalala. In all the verses related to inheritance, once the shares of heirs have been detailed, the deceased person is directly addressed, such as min ba'di wasiyatin yusi biha, after the bequest he has made. For instance, after outlining the shares of parents and children, it is stated min ba'di wasiyatin yusi biha, after the will he has dictated. Next, the shares of the spouses are mentioned, and again the verse concludes min ba'di wasiyatin yusina biha, after the will she has made. Later, in a situation where spouses have children, the passage ends with min ba'di wasiyatin tusuna biha, after the will you have made. Ghamidi Sahab draws our attention to the consistent reference to the deceased as the one making the will, you, he or she. The deceased is the subject of these actions. However, in the case of kalala, the Quran suddenly shifts its linguistic style. The verse states, min ba'di wasiyatin tawsuna biha, after executing the will that has been made. Here the subject is not mentioned. The form user is passive, indicating that the doer of the action, the one making the will, is left unspecified. There is no mention of you, he or she as in earlier cases. Ghamidi Sahab emphasizes that in this context, the deceased is not mentioned or addressed. The will is described in a passive form that has been made. This marks a stark contrast with earlier verses. He explains that yusa is a passive verb in Arabic. Its subject, the person who made the will, is not present. Had the subject been included, the verb would have taken an active form, just as in the previous examples. For illustration, Ghamidi Sahab provides an analogy. Zaid ate his food, and after that, the water was drunk. This construction is flawed if we retain Zaid as the subject. Either we must remove Zaid and say the food was eaten and the water was drunk, or to retain Zaid, we must maintain the active form. Zaid ate the food and Zaid drank the water. We cannot say Zaid ate the food and the water was drunk. Similarly, Ghamidi Sahab argues that if yusa is used, then its subject, the deceased, cannot be assumed to be under discussion. Otherwise, the Quran would not have employed the passive form. Because the passive voice is used here and the subject is absent, it follows that no attributes of that subject, such as kalala, can be logically attached. Therefore, kalala in this verse cannot refer to the deceased. As such, the only plausible meaning of kalala remaining is the one that denotes relatives who are neither children nor parents, such as a maternal uncle or paternal aunt. In Arabic, this is considered the most appropriate usage of kalala, and Ghamidi Sahab provides numerous literary examples to support this interpretation in his book Meezan. Thus far, we have examined two aspects of Ghamidi Sahab's critique of the traditional view. The first point challenges the insertion of the term maternal into the Quranic text. Such additions, Ghamidi Sahab contends, are unjustifiable. The second point hinges on the meaning of kalala. Ghamidi Sahab asserts it denotes relatives other than parents and children, with the passive verb yusa serving as the decisive textual clue. Accordingly, these verses in the Quran describe the kalala relatives and their siblings, along with the formula for calculating their shares. In our next video, we will examine the third aspect of Ghamidi Sahab's critique. We will also explore how his method for distributing inheritance in these two cases contrasts with that of the traditional scholars.